Hello friends, and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be my March wrap-up. March was a crazy month in terms of reading for me because I didn't know what I wanted to read. I DNF'd 3 books, which is crazy for me. I don't tend to DNF. I especially don't tend to DNF quickly, but I was not having it in the month of March, and honestly I'm really proud of myself. One of my reading goals this year was to DNF more, and I feel like I'm off to a really great start. I guess we're gonna look at the positives instead of the negatives. I believe I have 20 books here to talk about today. I have a mix of manga, a mix of horror, a mix of thrillers, a mix of all kinds of stuff. I was all over the place in March. My reading taste was just all across the board. So were my ratings, to be honest. I did have some standout books this month though, which I am super pleased about. So I will call March a win for DNFs and for actually reading books that I enjoyed. This hopefully isn't going to be too terribly long, but my wrap-ups are always a million years long. So let's start talking about some of these books. So hopefully I'm not keeping you here hostage for hours and hours and hours. Let's talk about DNFs first. One of the books I DNF'd was The Invisible Hour by Alice Hoffman. I received an ARC of this last year from Atria Books, and I did not make it very far into this one. I think, let's see, I still have the bookmark. Yes, I made it to page 39. I'll be honest, I was reading this for the extended version of the Pisces vlog I did in March for Patreon. So this wasn't in my original Pisces vlog, it was for my patrons. And I don't know what it was, but as soon as I started reading this, I was like, I am not going to like it. I am not interested. I just could not get into the story. I didn't want to pick it up. It took me maybe an hour to realize there's no way that I was gonna actually finish this book. I just couldn't do it, and so I was like, this might not be a hard DNF, but it is a soft DNF for right now. I just could not do it anymore, so I did set this to the side. I might come back to it later on, but as of right now, it's a no-go for me. Funnily enough, for that Pisces extended version for my patrons, I also DNF'd The Pisces by Melissa Broder. Now, I knew this book was going to be out of my comfort zone. I knew it wasn't going to be a book that I necessarily was like super interested in, but it was a book called The Pisces. I was reading it for a Pisces vlog. I just felt like it made sense for me to attempt it, so I did try and pick this one up. I actually DNF'd it around 67% into the book. Letty's sitting in my lap, sorry. I have a pup in my lap, but I DNF'd it around 67%, which is actually really far for me. I don't typically DNF books that far along. I will just push through and read it even though I don't want to. This is about the main character, Lucy. She's recently had a very bad breakup, so her sister invites her to come to Los Angeles and dog sit for the summer and kind of like recuperate and get her life on track, yada yada yada. She ends up meeting this man on the beach. There's a lot of other stuff going on in this book, but I really don't care to talk about it that much. Honestly, the main character was infuriating. I couldn't stand her. She was just really like judgmental and just kind of a dick to every other character that we encountered, and I kind of understood her perspective, but she was really frustrating to read from. But the reason I DNF'd is because there was some dog neglect / abuse going on that I was just not therefore I couldn't handle it. It was just too much for me. I just didn't want to read about it. As soon as it happened, I was so turned off from the book that I decided then and there I was going to DNF. So I do see why some people will enjoy this book, but it's not really a book for me anyways. It's not something that I tend to gravitate towards. It's not something that I tend to like, but adding in the dog neglect and abuse, I was just not really I was just not really interested in continuing the story, so that is the second book I DNF'd in March. The third book I DNF'd in March was Pieces of Her by Karen Slaughter. I was trying to get some old Book of the Month books off my TBR. I have a ton of Book of the Month books that just sit on my TBR shelves and collect dust, and I never pick them up. And I was like, why not pick the chunkiest book off my TBR? Why not just try and be bold and do it and go for that one? Who do I think I am? Seriously, I made it to page 167, which is actually very far, to be honest. This is about this mother and daughter who go to this mall for like some time together. Her mother is giving her a pep talk about life and telling her that she still has time, even though she's like 31 years old. She can find her path, find her calling, and this tragedy occurs while they're there. And the way her mother handles the tragedy, what she does in the middle of this crisis is very not normal. And basically the daughter starts questioning who her mom is, like what her mom's hiding, what's really going on, blah, blah, blah. I was intrigued at first, and then I started getting so bored that I just did not care. Like the mystery, who cares, right? I just didn't care enough to keep reading. I wasn't that invested in the characters. Honestly, the mystery and like what her mom's secrets are were kind of intriguing in the beginning, but the more I kept reading, the more I was so put off that I was like, yeah, okay, I literally don't care anymore. I did ask Instagram in my stories if this book was worth it, and several people, including Gabby or Gabby Reads here on YouTube, she told me that it was not worth it at all. So I do feel good with my decision to DNF this book. I do think my mom will actually like this, so I think I'm gonna pass it on to her and see if she wants to read it. I think she will probably like it more than I did, and she is a big Karen Slaughter fan, so I might ask her if she wants this. Mom, if you're watching, you want it, I'll save it for you. So let's talk about the books that I read for my Pisces reading vlog. I will have it linked down below if you missed it and you want to check it out. The first book I read was They Drown Our Daughters by Katrina Monroe. This is a horror book centered basically around water. The main character, Meredith, has just recently split from her wife, so she ends up taking her daughter back to her hometown called Cape Disappointment, and they go to stay with her mother, the young daughter's grandmother. Meredith's mother is suffering from some memory problems. She's also warning Meredith off. She's basically like, you shouldn't have come back, you are putting your daughter in harm's way, you should leave, it's not good for you to be here. And of course, because of her memory problems, Meredith is basically chalking it up to her mother is just not making sense, but it's basically because of those issues and nothing else. But Meredith's mother thinks there's a curse on their family involving the women, and that's basically why she wants Meredith to take her daughter and leave. So I really liked the idea of this book. I felt like it fit the Pisces vibe really well. I was intrigued. I was thinking we were getting like a mermaid water horror story, and it does have a lot to do with water, and the setting is really, really cool. It does take place, you know, in a really like beachy, beautiful place. This book is very interesting because it's both very predictable and also very bizarre in the turn that it takes. I would say the first half of the book is like extremely predictable, like what you think you're gonna get from it is what you get, and then the second half took a weird turn that I was kind of like, what is this? why are we doing that? I felt like I was left with a lot of questions because it didn't necessarily make sense all the way. Like at the end when everything happened, I was kind of like, okay, I'm still confused. It's also one of those books where you are following multiple women in the family, and I typically don't love books like that. I just have a hard time with multiple POVs. I just always tend to not care about most of them, but the story relies on getting glimpses of each woman, so it's very hard. I understand why the author did it. It's just not something that typically works for me. I also hated the ending because I guess the ending from a mile away, I felt like it was very obvious, and I was just kind of annoyed that that's the way that everything went. I just think the second half lost me a lot, so I am giving this 3.5 stars. Next up, we have Angel of the Underground by David Andreas, and this is about the main character, Robin, who is 15. She is from a Catholic group home. However, some of the kids from the group home are being murdered. So to protect the remaining children, they decide to split them up and send them to different like foster homes, so that way this murderer won't be able to pinpoint all the kids and it'll make it harder for them to kill them. Robin ends up getting placed in this foster home that actually doesn't have any religious affiliation. They're pretty against religion, and so Robin has a hard time acclimating to going from a very religious place to a very non-religious place. She ends up making friends with one of the other boys that lives there, and he introduces her to horror films. I did not enjoy this one, mostly because I found the writing to be very weird. It kind of came off clunky because I would reread sentences and they wouldn't make sense, and then sometimes they would make sense, and it took a few rereads to fully comprehend what the author was trying to say. I don't know if that was a me thing, but it was a very bizarre reading experience. I feel like the author might have had a hard time writing Robin and some of the other characters because Robin comes off not like a 15-year-old. It could be that the author was trying to show that she was very mature because she did grow up kind of quickly in this group home, so it made her a little bit more mature than 15. She just didn't talk like a 15-year-old. The kids didn't really talk like 15-year-olds. Sometimes they sounded way older, sometimes they sounded way younger. I felt like the adults also did that, where they would sound really like juvenile. This is also a quick story. It's not super long, and I think that was kind of a hindrance to the book because by the end, the ending was super fast. It was over in like a flash. And so the problem with that is there was all this buildup, and then the payoff was kind of not so great. I also hate to say it, but the author had a scene where Robin was exploring her own body. She is 15. She is in a different, environment now, and she felt, interested in exploring her body. And I just feel very oddly when men decide to write scenes like that from the viewpoint of a young girl. It's just very weird. It comes off very icky to me. I don't like reading them, so that also rubbed me the wrong way. Overall, I am giving this 2 stars. It just wasn't really what I wanted it to be. The next book is The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. This book should not have worked for me. It is more on the science fiction side. It's a very weird, it kind of has a literary style of writing to it, and honestly it just had so many things against it, but it was my favorite book out of that reading vlog. This is about this college town in Southern California that has this student who goes to sleep one night and then cannot be woken up the next day. And slowly, one by one, people start falling asleep and not being able to wake up. It's this disease, this illness that is spreading, and it's causing people to fall into this deep slumber. You're following multiple people in this book. You're following different kinds of people that are in different kinds of situations, and again, something that I don't typically like. I hate following that many people, especially when you can't get super connected to them. In this story, you don't learn a lot about every character because you don't get to spend too much time with them. You're really just in the moment with these characters, and usually that doesn't work for me. Usually I hate that. I like getting to know characters so I can get attached, but for some reason it worked so well. The sleeping aspect was just so unique and different. I felt like the writing was really beautiful, but also really easy to understand and follow. Definitely not perfect, but it was so fascinating and so fun. It's probably the best sci-fi book I've ever read to date, at least. I mean, hopefully I could read more that I really enjoy, but as of right now, this is my favorite, and I am giving it 4.5 stars. And the last book I read for that reading vlog was The Glass Woman by Caroline Leah. This is like a historical fiction, gothic romance with a little bit of mystery. It is classified more as like a horror book, but personally I don't find it to be as horror as it is claiming to be. I feel like it has more of like an air of mystery to it, and that's about it. This is about the main character whose mother is very sick and they don't have a lot of money, so she decides to get married to this man from another village. He's like a tradesman and he's actually very wealthy, so she thinks that this will be the best for her family, so she decides to marry him and move to his village. When she gets to the village, the people aren't that welcoming, and there's also some rumors about her new husband that his previous wife died kind of like mysteriously, and he was seen burying her at night alone, and it just felt very suspicious. But when she moves to this village and she moves into the house, she starts experiencing some weird things. I didn't love this book. It was very, very boring. I was kind of bored the entire time. I was expecting something to happen. I was looking for those horror elements to come through. They didn't come out till towards the end, and even then I feel like they're not horror elements, they're just kind of like mysterious elements. It was interesting for the most part. I felt like it was fairly easy to read. It was just very slow. It's very much a slow burn. The romance is one of those romances where not a lot happens. It's more like lingering glances and like lingering conversations, and that's about it. I would say the last 30% of the book I liked a lot more than first 70% of the book, which is unfortunate. It wasn't quite for me, so I'm giving it 3 stars. Next, I read a manga series. I ended up reading Wotakoi. This was recommended to me because I really enjoyed Sweat and Soap, and a lot of people were comparing this series to Sweat and Soap. The 2 main characters are kind of like nerdy characters. The main guy is a gamer. He spends all his time gaming. He loves gaming. And the main girl is kind of dabbling in everything. She likes gaming. She likes, you know, anime. She's very much into manga. Our main girl finds it hard to date, and she also is trying to keep her, you know, private life private at work. She doesn't want to announce to everyone that she works with what she likes to do in her spare time because she doesn't want to get judged for it. So when she moves to a new company and she realizes that she knows him and they used to be friends, it would be smart if they dated, kind of to eliminate the hardship of finding someone to date who also accepts all the things she's into. I have a love-hate relationship with this series. It's not bad. I think me going into it expecting Sweat and Soap was not the right idea. I did think this was cute, but I had a hard time getting into it for like the first couple of volumes. The first like 4 volumes were a 3.5 to me, and then the last like 2 were more of a 4-star. I did get into the series more as I was reading it. I just didn't like love their relationship. I wasn't as invested in them. I will say he was my favorite. I didn't love her as much. She was a little irritating to me. I don't know. I just didn't love them as much as I was hoping for. A lot of the side characters though I really did enjoy, and I thought they were very cute, and I liked reading to see them as well. So it's hard because I did end up overall liking this series. I just don't think it's a new favorite. It's not something that I think is like the greatest manga series I've ever read. Personally, I think Sweat and Soap is better, and I did like it a lot more, and I liked the relationship in that one a lot more. I I would say it's like between a 3.5 and a 4. I don't really know how I feel about it, honestly. Yeah, my feelings are kind of up in the air. Next up, I read The Clinic by Kate Quinn. This was actually one of my anticipated releases of this year. I just love the cover, but also I knew it took place in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I live, so I was very excited. I love books that take place in the Pacific Northwest. I just think they're always so atmospheric and beautiful to read. This is a thriller about the main character Meg, who works for a casino, and she basically works to like catch cheaters. She's also addicted to pain pills. She ends up hearing that her sister Haley, who is a famous actress, has died in rehab and they're calling it suicide. And Meg doesn't believe it for a second. She knows that Haley would not commit suicide, so she decides to put herself into the rehab and check in and figure out what really happened to her sister. I don't know what people are saying. I personally really enjoyed this. It is kind of long. It is on the longer side for a thriller, and I do think that it should have been shorter. I think it did not need to be as long as it was. But that being said, the chapters are very short and I feel like it reads very quickly. I wasn't bored at any point of this book. I wasn't like disinterested. I wasn't wishing it was over. Like, I did enjoy my time with this book. And I actually felt like the twists were really, really good. I didn't expect them and I didn't see them coming, which I love. This is also the first book that the author has written while being sober, and I think that is incredible, and I think it adds to the experience of reading, and I think that the authenticity is definitely there. There are some questionable things at the end of the book, particularly with mental health, that I'm not quite sure how I feel about. Overall, I did have a good time with this one, and I thought it was really fun, and I loved the setting. Like I said, I love all books that take place in the Pacific Northwest, so the setting really worked for me, and overall I'm going to give this 4 stars. I ended up picking My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell for my March Buzz Wordathon prompt. I went with My Dark Vanessa because it's also on my 24 for 2024, and I've been meaning to actually sit down and read this book for such a long time, so I decided that I would, you know, get 2 things done at once and just sit down and read this one. This story is about the character Vanessa, who was groomed by her teacher at the age of 15, and you basically get the past and the present. The past is telling the story of how she met said teacher and he started grooming her and how it progressed, and in the present day there is another young woman that has recently called the teacher out for his inappropriate relationship with her. I don't know if it's because I read Tampa before I read this one, but I was expecting this to be a harder read for me than it was. I'm not saying it was like super easy and it wasn't like impactful or, you know, disgusting to read at times, but I think Tampa kind of helped me because Tampa was so explicit. This wasn't as bad for me to read, so I think that was a help, but I also just felt like this didn't hit me as hard as a lot of people have said that it's hit them. I think that the story is really well done. It's really well written. I really like the character Vanessa. I think that the author did a great job of trying to achieve what they wanted. I think it comes across very beautifully. I just don't think I had an emotional reaction while reading this book. So I think my reading experience was a little bit different than others just because I know this is a very like hard-hitting book for most people, but I am happy I read it and I did enjoy my time with it. It was a very quick read. I felt like I didn't have to force myself to read it and it went by very quickly, so I am giving this 4 stars. Next up we have Murder Road by Simone St. James. I absolutely adore Simone St. James, so I was very excited to get her newest book. This takes place in 1995 and it's about the characters April and Eddie, who are going on their honeymoon. They're going to this little resort to celebrate, and while they're driving at night they're kind of a little lost and and they see this hitchhiker. They decide to pick this hitchhiker up and they notice that she's bleeding and it looks like she's been attacked. So they decide to rush her to the hospital. However, when they are driving to the hospital, this truck starts following them and they get very nervous that it could be whoever did this to the hitchhiker. When they finally get to the hospital, they find out that unfortunately the hitchhiker didn't make it and the police are suspecting Eddie and April. They are their main suspects because they were there. They're the ones that dropped her off at the hospital. April and Eddie have to figure out what's going on and prove their innocence, and they start uncovering that this road that they picked the hitchhiker up on is known for hitchhikers getting murdered. I will say this is probably the most thriller type of story that I've read from her so far, and honestly it is her weakest story in my opinion. I don't feel like this one stands up as well to like The Sundown Motel or The Haunting of Maddie Clare. I just feel like this one is much weaker in terms of the type of story that it is. But I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way. I think it was still a fun story. I think it was still a good story. I just think that it's one of her weaker plots. I just didn't think it was as good as some of her other books. I still enjoyed it and I am giving this one 4 stars as well, mainly because it was really quick, it was really easy, and it was really fast and fun. This type of story kind of relies on it being semi-predictable, and it was fairly easy to figure out where this one was going. However, I really did like the characters. I really enjoyed April and Eddie and their relationship. I know some people probably won't. They kind of come off very insta-lovey. There also are these 2 sisters, the Snell sisters. They are so funny and they just are like adorable. And then there's also an older lady named Rose who I also really enjoyed. So I did like the characters a lot, but in terms of plot, it wasn't my favorite. Still enjoyable, just not the best from Simone St. James. Then I read Schrader's Chord by Scott Leeds. This was actually my March book club pick for my Patreon. We read this and then had a little meeting about it, and I actually had no idea what this book was about before I read it, and I kind of think that did help a little bit because I didn't enjoy this one that much. There's multiple characters that we're following in this story, but one of the characters, Charlie, his dad has just passed away and he ends up going back home to Seattle to, you know, attend the funeral and be with his siblings, and he learns that his father left him this present, and it's these records that are basically cursed. This book was over 400 pages. It was way too long in my opinion. It was very boring, and every time I thought something exciting was going to happen, it would just go back to being like nothing. And then the ending was just very weird. I don't know why the author chose to end the book the way they did, because the ending just came off very weird to me. I don't know, it left a weird taste in my mouth. I can't really go into details because it's spoilery, but I didn't love the ending. I was just bored most of the time. I didn't really care for the characters. I didn't think it was exciting. I was hoping it was going to be a mashup of Hellraiser and The Ring, and it didn't really do that. It didn't really do much for me, honestly, in terms of like horror elements. I am probably going to give it 3 stars. That is probably more lenient than it should be. It should probably be a 2.5, but I am giving it 3 stars. And then I read volumes 1 and 2 of The Red Thread. This was a very cute. Justin bought this for me and he thought I would enjoy it. It was a lot of fun. They were very quick reads. But this is about the characters Farm and Dean, and they meet at college. They basically have this like instant connection, instant pull towards each other, and it feels like they've been destined to meet. And that's basically the plot. I can't go into too much detail because it's spoilery. It's a romance. It's very cute. It is a little cringy. I feel like some of the dialogue and some of the writing is a little clunky. I don't know if it's like the translation or what, but it is a little clunky to read. I did really enjoy it. I liked the overall plot. I liked the characters. Again, a little cringy. I don't necessarily mind that in a manga, especially in like a romance manga. I'm not too terribly picky. I think I will give both volumes 4 stars. I'm interested to see if this is complete or if there's any more volumes, because it kind of feels like there could be more to the story, or it could just be over. I have no idea. Then I read Love, a Kitten and a Salty Dog. This is another manga. This was also very cute and very romance heavy. This is about one of the characters who is a college student, and he finds this stray kitten. He ends up taking it to this vet, and he kind of falls for the college student right off the bat, and they start this like friendship of trying to take care of the cat, learn about the cat, find the cat's owners. There is more to it. Again, I can't go into the full spoilery parts, but it's very cute. Again, a little cringy. Sometimes that happens with romance manga. I don't think they can help it to make it sometimes a little cringy, but it was very cute. This is a one-shot, so there's no more. It's not a series. You can just read one and be done. So it was very quick and fast and cute. I had a good time while reading it, so I will also probably give this 4 stars. Then I read My Boss is a Giant. He manages my every need with enormous skill. This is like the complete manga collection. This was very funny, very weird, very cute, but very interesting. This is about this woman who is just like a very earnest, hardworking woman. She does her job. She likes doing it. You know, she's just like very happy to help. She's very cute, and her boss is more like intimidating and scary, and like seems like he's kind of got like a mean edge to him, but he's a big softie, and he ends up confessing that he has feelings for her, and they start to have a relationship, and they're just very different, but they work very well together. It is very smutty. I feel like the title kind of and the cover kind of says that, so very, very smutty. There's a lot of sex in this, but it's very cute. I liked the characters. It's kind of silly, it's kind of dumb. It did what I wanted it to do. It entertained me, so I will probably also give this 4 stars. The last 2 books were my favorites of the month. I had such a good time reading these books, and I really enjoyed them. First up is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I know so many people have been talking about this one. I was so lucky to get an arc of this from Celadon Books, and I loved this. It was such a fun thriller, and I know some people are going to absolutely hate this. It has podcast elements, which I know so many people are over. I love a podcast element in a thriller. I think it's so enjoyable, and it just adds to the book. This is about the main character, Lucy, and she has moved away from her hometown because she is said to have murdered her best friend. Now, she wasn't found guilty of it, but basically everyone has just come to the conclusion that she did it, and they're not open to discuss anyone else. They're just like, no, you did it, because she has no memory of the night, and she can't say that she didn't because she doesn't know for sure. However, this man named Ben, he is a podcaster, and he has looked into the murder of Lucy's best friend, and he wants to find out what really happened, and he wants Lucy to be a part of this, but Lucy is not really sure she wants to, but she ends up going back to her hometown. She is going to try and figure out what happened to her best friend. I was hooked from the minute I started it. Lucy is such a fun main character. She's very sarcastic. There's a lot of good humor in this book, which I was kind of shocked by, but she's very sarcastic, she's very funny, she's just very blunt, but in the like funniest way, and I like her approach to everything. I loved her grandmother. Her grandmother was such a sassy character as well. So meddling, but in a great way. I loved the podcaster Ben. I also enjoyed him as a character. This was just like a great time. It was entertaining. It was thrilling. The twists were actually very, very good because I thought I had figured the book out, and it is a slight bit predictable, but I think in the way that I didn't expect it to be, and it honestly kind of made me emotional too. It pulled at my heart a little bit, and I think the overall story was just so well done. It just was like such a good thriller. It was juicy. I don't know. I just had the best time while reading it. Like I said, it was a little bit predictable. It's not perfect, and I am probably giving this 4.5 stars. And last, we have The Mysterious Case of the Alberton Angels by Janice Hallett. I was also sent an ARC of this one, and I hadn't had a chance to get to it, so I decided to read it in March. And I actually read this one while sick. I was sick like the first week of March. I typically can't read when I'm sick, but this book, I could not put it down, so I had to read it even while being sick, okay? We all know I loved The Appeal by Janice Hallett. I loved that book. It was one of my favorites of last year. And then I read the Twyford Code and was so sad because I had to DNF it because I couldn't stand reading it. So I was a little nervous about this one. I was a little anxious. I was like, I hope it's more like The Appeal. I hope I enjoy it. And thank God it was closer to The Appeal. And honestly, I think it's my new favorite Janice Hallett. I am giving this 5 stars. Okay, I'm giving it 5 stars. This is like my first 5-star in such a long time, which is a miracle. This is about this cult that ended up brainwashing this teenage girl that she gave birth to the Antichrist, and her and the baby ended up disappearing. Our main character, Amanda, is a true crime author, and she is going to write a book on this cult because she needs to revive her career because it's basically tanking and she needs something to boost her up. However, her rival, Oliver, is also doing a book on this cult, and they end up having to team up because they each have things that the other one needs, so they decide to work together. It's written definitely more like The Appeal versus the Twyford Code, so if you were like me and you couldn't get into the Twyford Code because of how it was written, I definitely suggest looking into this one because it is much more like The Appeal. It also was a lot darker. I was so shocked. I kept reading this and I was like, is this a mystery book or am I reading straight horror right now? I thought I was gonna read like a fun little mystery, and like it was fun, but like it really went kind of dark and I was so into it. I was so here for it. I could not put this down. I was trying to figure out how this book was going to end. I was trying to put pieces together. It didn't work because this twisted and turned me upside down 17 times and I was on my head spinning around. Like, I had no idea what was going on. I kept trying to figure out how this book was going to end and I could not do it. And I loved that. It's better than The Appeal. Not by a lot, because granted I gave The Appeal 4.5 stars, but this one is my new favorite. Obsessed with this one. Thank you so much, Atria, for sending me this ARC because I am so glad I read it because it is 100% a new favorite. So good. 5 stars. Amazing. Alright, my friends, that is going to do it for my March wrap-up. It was a pretty decent reading month. I'm very happy about it. Feel free to let me know if you've read any of these, what you read in March, your favorite, your least favorite books. I would love to know. If you enjoy my wrap-ups, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. That way I know and I can keep doing these for you monthly. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I also have a Patreon linked down in the description box. We can become friends, talk about books, horrifying books, thrilling books, romance books, manga, all that good fun stuff. And with that being said, I hope you are having a great day, night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!